Hi there, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to our second event on day 2 for this InLeeds event. It's really great to have you all guys watching us. And for this session, we're going to be looking at opportunities within the public sector. And I'm really happy to say we've got 3 excellent panel members who will be joining us. Firstly, we've got Hannah from the NHS. Hannah, I don't know if you want to wave and just say hello.
Hiya.
That's Hannah. And then we've got Aisha from the DWP.
Hi, everyone.
And we've got Lee from the Ministry of Justice.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Again, thank you very much for joining us. I know we had a couple of internet issues at the start, mainly from me, who was hosting it, so not exactly great. I have got some questions for the panel, but obviously, if you do want to ask your own questions, please do pop them in the comment section, and we'll be able to put those questions to the panel throughout the session. So, gonna just kick things off. We'll go clockwise around the table. So, Hannah, I don't know if you want to just give us a little bit of background as to who you are and what you do within the NHS.
Yeah, so I'm my name's Hannah. I'm currently a ward manager on a male mental health acute ward that's part of the Leeds and York Foundation Trust. I've worked across male and female acute inpatient wards here in Leeds for the past 8 to 10 years.
Fantastic. That sounds like, I bet that's a really, really interesting role, and I bet you've seen quite a lot of different things.
Yeah, lots. It is really interesting. It's about the people that we meet, isn't we? Yeah, we see a lot of different people coming through our services.
Absolutely fantastic. And for yourself, Aisha?
Okay, so Aisha Malik, Department of Work and Pensions. The current grade I'm in is a grade 7, and I'm the team lead for the capability and resources team. And what my team is responsible for is sort of capacity planning, resource planning, internal capability, but also recruitment as well into the commercial profession. But wider than that, the other role that I sit in is the DWP Muslim Network lead as well.
Absolutely, that's brilliant. That's really, really good. And Lee, same question to yourself.
Thanks, Tim. So I'm Lee Stronach. I'm currently head of contract management, assurance, and risk management. I'm a grade 6 in the Ministry of Justice. It's assurance, it's audit, so potentially seen as being a little bit dull and boring, but actually not, particularly at the minute around COVID. My functions looks after all the contracts across prison and probation service to make sure that they are operating effectively. We're getting the service that we're paying supply chain for, ensure that the services and the goods that are coming into prisons and probation are quality and the standard that we need in order to function effectively.
Fantastic. So there's a real, as everyone can see, there's a real variety there as to what the panel do. Remember, now you know what they do. If you do have any specific questions for them, please do pop them in the chat below, and we will be able to put those questions to the panel. So kind of going on to the second question now, and we'll start again with you, Hannah. How did you start working with the NHS?
So I started working with the NHS through being a student. So I was interested in being a nurse and wondered which area I wanted to go into. So I went and looked at lots of different universities, and I came to Leeds because I'm from Barnsley and I still live in Barnsley, but I came to Leeds, and I went to Leeds University in the end because they offered a really good course in terms of I suppose my education, and then what opportunities were available in terms of placement areas. So the placement areas linked to Leeds University were Leeds and York Partnership, and I'd heard lots of really good things about the trust and the organisation. So through my training, then having placement in the different areas across the trust made me really want to work for them. So I was really lucky that once I did qualify, I was offered a job working on the acute wards.
That's brilliant. What course was that? Sorry, just in case for some of the people who weren't.
So I did so it's my mental health nursing, but I did the postgrad to a master's in mental health nursing. So I'd done a degree in psychological studies, and that's where I got an interest in mental health and people, and being a little bit nosy about people and seeing what's going on. And so I think that then gravitated to mental health and then the nursing part of it, because it's really hands-on and you get to just be with people all day, which I'm a little bit nosy, but I like people. So it's and then you just get lots of really good opportunities, I suppose, where the trust offered.
Yeah, and how was that postgraduate study? How did you find it as as going from undergraduate to postgraduate? What was that jump like for you?
It's hard. You can't say it isn't hard, and it is challenging. And I was a mature student, if you like, because I think was it over 25, so I was 30 when I did my masters, which or just under 30. And I think when you do, I suppose, a degree or a master's in such as nursing, you've got your academic work, but then you've also got your placement areas that you need to do as well. And then sometimes people have got family and commitments to try and make sure that you can, pay your bills, but also you've got to be able to give your time. So it can be challenging, but it's really rewarding. And I know that's a bit cheesy, but actually, especially as a student, as you start to work through, the years and you feel that you're learning more and you're developing more, it makes the challenge, I suppose, worth it at the end.
Yeah, no, that's really good to hear, and I think that's really good to hear for some of the graduates and even some final year students who are on this. That kind of understanding that jump up to postgraduate study. So, Aisha, what about yourself? How did you get involved with the DWP?
So, I think my story is a proper typical civil servant story. I had no idea what I wanted to do. Academically, university wasn't an option, so really it was, where can I go that I'm going to earn decent money? Applied lots of places, ended up getting a job in Bradford Job Centre, which was my very first role, frontline client advisor. And then one advantage of a big organisation like DWP, the scope to progress once I kind of got a feel of what I was good at, which again was, I wanted to make a difference to what I did. What DWP, that's its core sort of function, is to make a difference to people's lives. So progress from job centre, frontline, to corporate centre, which is where I currently am. 35 years and I'm still here, so it must be all right. It's doing its I'm still here, enjoying it.
That's really, really good to know. And I'm just kind of another question, which is kind of linked to that. Like, how did the Muslim Network and how did you get involved with that? Because that seems like a really interesting initiative.
Okay. So I soon realised, progressing through a big department, that there was fewer and fewer people of my colour, of my sex, in senior roles. I wanted to understand what the challenges were. And where I could help mentor or be able to feed back in to help support internal progression. And one thing that I identified is people of my faith, which I'm a Muslim, very, very, very few progressed above and beyond the sort of SEO, which is our senior executive officer role. I'm one of 5 female Asians in my grade across my whole corporate directorate, and we're a big area. So the Muslim Network was really set up as a sort of helping identify and help nurture that sort of internal progression. But it's gone wider than that. From me setting up the Muslim Network, I'm actually now sort of helping set up a faith and belief network across the department, and it's looking at an area that disadvantaged people of all backgrounds. How can somebody like myself that's been through it help share lived experiences?
That's really, really good. And I think that's something that will really, really support some graduates who are looking to work in different public sector bodies, and having that kind of network and that support, I think is something that is really, really good to hear and really good to know about, and that's available. Lee, what about yourself? How did you get involved with the Ministry of Justice?
Yeah, so I've been in Ministry of Justice about 5 years ago now. Previously DWP, again for many years before that, mainly in criminal justice system across the 2 departments. So initially as a fraud investigator, in DWP, starting off investigating multi benefit fraud, moving into organised fraud, onto surveillance teams, travelling the country. Sounds maybe a little bit sexy sometimes, on surveillance teams and sitting in backs of cars and boots of cars, following people, but it's really not. But nevertheless, very interesting. Certainly woke me up to what goes on in the world, actually. So it's, I don't come from a small village in Northumberland anywhere. I'm a couple of miles away from Newcastle, big lively city centre, but still quite naive to the world, actually. And that really gave me a broad understanding of what goes on. But again, actually, why people are driven to do what they do and commit crime and commit fraud. I'm not making excuses for people, but I do understand why crime is committed in most occasions, anyway. So from there, moving into Her Majesty's Courts and Tribunal Service, so away from the investigating, but leading a counter fraud team, and then into more of an assurance and audit role. So an operational side of things from the investigations, but also making sure that what was going on internally within the courts and tribunal service was working and working well. Making sure all the legislation and the processes and systems that support the effective running of courts and that part of the criminal justice system is working. And then into where I am now, Prison and Probation Service, in a similar role around assurance, but focusing on the commercial aspects of things. Just picking up on the conversation before, actually, with the Muslim network, I think it probably is worth just reinforcing that, because there is an awful lot across government departments now that we are doing to promote job seekers in that area, not just from within, though, to understand the needs and wants of our customers, our stakeholders, our partners, but a huge drive within the Black Asian minority. And minority backgrounds. They are historically have been underrepresented within the civil service, but there's a huge push now, making some really positive inroads around that. So, I think I said earlier on when we spoke separately, happy to have offline discussions with that. If you need any more information around that, we do offer direct entrance and support direct entrance from the BIM McCune community. So happy to support any further conversation.
That's really, really good to know that support is there. And don't forget, guys, please do ask a question in the comments if you do have one on the back of anything that's been said. So I'm going to kind of come out a little bit from just the job role and more talk about the organisation now. And this one's a bit of a part A and part B question, which is, what is it like to work in your organisation? We'll say pre-COVID, when life was feels much sunnier back then, before COVID, and then how it has changed kind of afterwards, and how things might have slightly changed, how that dynamic might have changed. I feel like for you, Hannah, it's probably a lot more stressful with the kind of changes. But I'll come to you first, Hannah. What is it like working in the NHS, and how has COVID heavily affected that?
So I suppose pre-COVID, in the world of mental health, or the world of especially acute mental health, no day is the same. I think you can never. I think it can be quite challenging. Lost all my words. It's hard to describe. I think rewarding. Oh, sorry, I've gone off then. Boring myself, maybe. So pre-COVID, I think you got it's not much different, and I know that sounds silly. So there are extra things at the moment that add extra challenges. So wearing PPE. So we work with patients that live quite chaotic lives, or really challenging, or acutely unwell in terms of the mental health. And so what PPE has done is add an extra layer in terms of communication barriers and how we can assess and understand people, and how we come across to people and each other that we want to offer care for. The wards, we've had to add layers of restrictions onto the wards that we might not have had before, which then can be really upsetting for people. And we've got people that can't see the families as much as they would have done before. So we've had to make a lot of changes. And then, but at the same time, the work that we still do is no day is ever the same, because of the people because Leeds is a really diverse city, and I think so we get a lot of different people that come through secondary mental health services for lots and lots of different reasons. I used to work on the female wards before I moved over, and now I work on the male wards. And we've got the big student population in Leeds, and how we can support them. And I know there's lots of networks around supporting people. And then just because of the nature of the city, it's just really busy in it. And then I suppose, and the COVID is just the fear. People in the city are worried about COVID. I think the fear of getting it. I think the challenges in terms of people that are coming through our services that have never used mental health services before. And it's got quite a stigma, I think, in terms of mental illness still. There's a lot of work to do about improving its reputation, I suppose, and how people engage. In people losing their jobs, the lack of support and people being isolated has then led them to becoming unwell or needing that bit of extra support. And our job has been to try and understand the change in population as well coming through, which has been, but it's interesting as well. So I think it's challenging, but part of the work we do is really interesting. Sorry if that's a load of ramble. I lose my words sometimes. They're in somewhere, and then when they come, they get lost.
No. That was a perfect answer. Don't you worry. And you guys are doing a really, really good job as well, keeping us all kind of sane and looking after us. So thank you, Syra. How was life? What was life like at the DWP before? Like, just general when we are allowed in offices and things, and how has that kind of changed afterwards?
Okay, so COVID literally has changed the whole way that DWP works back to front. I mean, the main thing for our department is, we're the biggest public service department. Our biggest interface is between people and government, and everything we do has a direct impact on people's lives. So you're talking about the whole range of benefits, from maternity to employment to state pension. I mean, if you're physically looking at changes, our offices are closed. As a workforce, I would say 90% is working from home, and that had to happen in an instant. It was very much an email came out that said, that's it, nobody go back into the office from tomorrow. What changed in terms of job roles is the impact of COVID resulted in, I think it was something around 20 million citizens' claims came through within a short amount of period. I've got the figure somewhere, brother. 2.4, you know what, I was exaggerating a bit. We are the best department though. 2.4 million new UC claims from households, 2.9 new claim from individuals. The scale of that, which was just between March and May within that short period, it meant 80% of DWP workforce was redeployed. So I work in the commercial profession. I'm a corporate centre, been there for 13 years. An email from our permanent secretary literally said, everything is on hold, that the priority is universal claimants. We all had to, in that instant, completely learn a new role, a new system, a new guidance, new policy. And that's one of the things with, if you're looking for a dynamic place to be able to kind of like be really responsive to what people need, DWP was what we did. And even in my area of work, COVID started last year, it's coming up to a year. We've still got a third of our colleagues that are still supporting universal credits as what's called the work coach role. So yeah, major impact. On the contracting side, which is where I'm in commercial, you had suppliers that suddenly had to, we had to renegotiate contracts because of their payment mechanism, but also because of the services that they provided completely stopped, and also to protect small enterprises from going under. So dealing with ministers to get policies, guidelines changed overnight, very scary place to have been in. Very sort of, we knew the job we had was very important. So everybody kind of like, I would say we worked excessive hours within a short amount of time. But the other thing civil service offers is flexible working. My hours now, I log on 7 o'clock in the morning till maybe 8 or 9. I'll take a break, make sure the family's fine, and I can log back on at a later time around my meetings. Sometimes I'm working till 8, but that suits me. That's an advantage of a civil service sort of a job, is the flexibility.
That's excellent. I was going to say, you kind of like, just hearing from you guys, you actually think of, yes, the COVID had a big effect on like us as a university and how we worked, but you guys were actually kind of that front line providing that kind of support to people. Like universal credit has been a massive financial helpline for a lot of people throughout the crisis. Lee, what about how did it affect the MOJ? What was life like before COVID, and kind of how has it affected and how has it changed things?
Yeah, so I mean, as you would expect, I think referring back to the previous answer, overnight, the way most, if not all, government departments changed. I think forgetting the kind of logistical side of it, and how we would start to work from home, reduction in travel, etc., then Ministry of Justice, one of its main drivers is to protect the public, and to keep prisoners and public safe, and to ensure that there is a smooth criminal justice system operating from once arrested and charged, then all the way through the system to release from prison or into probation and beyond. So public safety is a huge concern. It's a major driver. So obviously a lot of work ongoing around that on a day-to-day basis. Prior to COVID, then there were challenges around the number of court cases, how courts are operating, how many outstanding court cases were being heard, and the backlog, which I think has been on again in the news this week, because COVID's had a huge impact with that, because obviously the court hearings, certainly criminal courts for juries, couldn't go ahead. So we're now tens of thousands of court hearings behind. So a huge amount of planning now going forward as to how that's going to be overcome. Recent discussions about Nightingale courts, as they've been termed in the press, I think, and operating huge sites of hearings to allow case progression and to make sure that people hear their cases in as quick a response time as we possibly can, bearing in mind that people are still committing crime, people are still getting arrested, people are still having to go through the justice system. So I think the logistics around that are massive. But even down then to prisoner safety, we couldn't have any lack of planning and thought around prisoner safety because of COVID, because there was such a churn of prisoners on a daily basis, moving prisons or new prisoners coming in having been charged and then sentenced. There was no testing around at the time to understand whether they were positive or not. So particularly on the bigger prisons, where the prison community is thousands, then that one person who has COVID, we wouldn't know about it, obviously spreads the virus around that community very quickly, especially in confined spaces. So trying to manage that and to reduce the risk of that occurring again has been a huge logistical problem. That was ranging from do we lock prisoners up 24 hours a day, which there's any amount of arguments as to why that should or shouldn't happen. The possibility of buying almost prisoner bubbles and holding cells to keep prisoners in there before they go into the main prison community after 2 weeks, and kind of self-isolate the prison community. But then also the probation service. How do you operate the probation service effectively, which is there to protect the public, to monitor and to educate prisoners or people who are on probation, but keep the public safe. How do you do that if you can't see people face to face and sat down in front of you every week, every fortnight, every month, etc. And then again, I think we've touched on it, the supply chain. So prison and probation service spends approximately 2.4 billion pound a year outsourcing its services, including all prisons. But anything from toilet paper in prisons to dog food for guard dogs. What effect will COVID have on that supply chain to make sure we get that? So, prisoners are fed, dogs are fed, prisoners are fed and watered, etc., etc. And to make sure that the supply chain was still operating, but also that payments to the supply chain weren't hindered any, because any delays in paying our suppliers obviously has a huge financial impact on them at a time when there's huge concerns over the financial well-being of organisations anyway. So huge considerations and demands. Awful lot of quick lessons learned as well, because the general thinking was that there would be a second wave. So it's to then minimise the risks and issues of a second wave, to ensure that the initial huge kind of hurdles that we had to get over at wave 1 didn't have such a massive impact at wave 2.
Yeah, I think, like you said, I think it was on the news last night about the prisons and potentially using theatres. Just one other quick question, Lee: is that where all the toilet roll went, by the way, to the prisons? Just just checking. See if it was
with trolleys. Yeah. I never thought about that, actually.
We do have a couple of questions in the comments, and I'm going to come back to them because I've got one last burning question before we do kind of go to the comments and maybe some follow-up questions. And it's kind of the key kind of driver as to why we're doing this conversation, which is for anyone who's looked on civil service jobs or looked on NHS jobs, there's always a job which appears which you're like, I didn't even know that existed. I didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't know somebody actually was paid to do that, or that it was needed, but it seems obvious. So I'm just going to kind of go around the panel now for people who obviously work on the ground. Hannah, I'll come to you first. Are there any jobs in the NHS that you were like, I didn't actually know that was a thing? I know that you kind of vocationally went into mental health nursing, but was there anything else that you thought, well, I didn't even know that was a thing?
I was writing a list when we looked at the questions. Was all that, because in my head, when you're a nurse, you come onto a ward, and I'm not really sure what I ever thought went on around to keep even the wards, going, or us going. And then I wrote a list of all the areas, and then so I suppose even just things that keep us going in terms of this, like estates and the management of the hospitals. We've got people that look at quality improvement. There's research, and how then the research obviously is fed into the clinical work that we do, to the care that we give to people. There's all the HR stuff in terms of training, recruitment, performance. People, I was like, writing a list, and it's so long, but I suppose it takes, there's lots of areas, isn't there, that people then get interested in wanting to go, like continuous improvement. There's there's lots, and it's really, I think it's interesting because then you can see that you might start somewhere. So you might start, and I know people that have then maybe started on the wards in different roles as the support workers or nurses or working housekeeping, but then have taken an interest in more of the quality improvement work or the IT systems, because obviously people have to run and set up to make sure that it works, and they've then gone and it works very well together, doesn't it? Because the work that's around us, it keeps us going, allows us to do what we do, and then the work that we do helps to keep the rest of us going, I suppose.
Kind of providing the backbone to the kind of the service and just keeping it all linked together.
And there's so many that you don't, that I never even thought about, I think, until I started working within the NHS, even to understand what services we provide. That and I suppose PPE is a huge part at the moment for people, isn't it? But it's like it takes an army. But our logistics teams, the people that have then been able to source the amount of PPE that we need, how they plan of where and how they work out what areas need it, because we've got so many different clinical areas as well. So there's inpatients, but then community teams and lots of different areas, and there's a full team that looks at understanding what the need is, where it needs to go, how it gets there. And that's a full job and service in itself, which I never would have thought about until, I suppose, it feels a bit more prevalent at the minute.
Yeah, no, that's really good to know. And I didn't even think about, people, obviously the logistics side of the NHS. Even me now coming up with this, I didn't even think of that kind of that kind of route. Aisha, coming to you, what kind of role, were there any roles in the DWP that surprised you, that you were actually like, I didn't know that was a thing, or maybe people don't know is a job which they can apply for?
So I did exactly the same. I went on to our intranet, started making a list. And I think the majority of the roles are going to be replicated in any big organisation. But the one that I only became aware of was when I progressed from a local office into corporate centre. And that's when working in a policy environment as a policy expert, found out that there was a legal department, and also found out that there was a finance department, because on the commercial side, it's always making sure that whatever is put in place is within guidelines legally, but also financially. But the only role that I think that surprised me again recently is because of COVID, because of the sort of pressures that colleagues have been under, the department put together a wellbeing package. So we have our own internal psychologists, which I wasn't aware of. So they've helped design wellbeing packages, awareness sessions, and it is really to help people, working under the strain, the stress, but also the totally unfamiliar way of how we work at the moment.
Yeah, who knew? When you think when we have psychology students typically come into us, we usually talk to them about NHS roles or potentially working in a Ministry of Justice and looking at those kind of areas. But who knew that the DWP had psychologists? And I think that's a key thing. It's that there's so many different jobs and roles that people can go into. Lee, what about for the MOJ? Any hidden departments or any hidden roles? I'm guessing there might be some you might not be allowed to talk about potentially. I don't know.
Yeah, but well, there is that side to it. I mean, it is. Most large government departments do have such a broad range of jobs. We've touched on some there. Psychologists, yes, absolutely, in the Ministry of Justice, particularly around the kind of prison and probation reform and the targeting of reducing reoffending, absolutely. Commercial side, commercial specialists, analysts, criminal analysts, finance, absolutely. All the way through then to prison officers, people who support the judiciary. So the judiciary don't work, they're not employed by the Ministry of Justice, they are paid separately, but they are civil servants who support the judiciary. Quite high pressured role, quite an interesting role, particularly with some of the characters of the judges I'm led to believe. But then anti-bribery and corruption teams, particularly around the prisons and the investigations into that, really interesting work. Obviously, the prison warden, prison officers, get wrong for saying wardens, it's my age. Prison officers, they're on the front line, often dealing with organised criminals, real, the worst of society at times, who are at risk of being bribed or face corruption, whether it be or threat of their own safety of their family, up to just wanting more money. So yeah, real diverse. Pretty much, I'm not going to say it all, but there's probably not many jobs in government that don't exist in private sector, to be fair.
Yeah, and I'm gonna stay with you, Lee, just because we've had one of the questions coming through the chat. So please do, everybody, keep commenting, keep asking your questions, so we can put them to this expert panel that we've got. And this one, Lee, comes from Chris. He said that he studies BA Criminal Justice and Criminology. Do you have any advice about graduate programs or opportunities in that area? He does have a particular interest in counter-terrorism, but any advice is appreciated. Yeah,
so the grad programs, they operate slightly differently now. Did a bit of research prior to this call. It's not operating how they used to, actually. So, but the chances of getting a direct entrance into that kind of work, I think, probably quite slim. In all fairness, around counter-terrorism. I'm gonna have to come back to you on that. Can we link up a different way? Because there are ways of doing that, but I would just need to do a bit of digging, because it is obviously quite a niche environment. I do some work in those areas, but the best way to look to get into that area would probably need a bit of digging, because obviously it's not something that we would always put out onto the internet.
No, that's absolutely
fine. We can get in touch, maybe by yourself, Tim, if I can link up with Chris.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. What I'd advise Chris to probably do is if he emails his university careers team, and then we can link up through yourself there, Lee, to try and maybe find the answer for that. So, Chris, thank you very much for your question. The next one comes from Sarah. Lee, I'll give you a break, which is thanks for the really interesting session so far. As someone who works with the university students, many of whom are keen to get into the civil service, and I'll probably add NHS into this as well, Hannah, because I think it's very similar. What advice would you give to those who are feeling less confident about applying at the moment? So, Aisha, I'll come to you first, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So DWP is absolutely desperate for, people from a diverse background, and people that have got, graduates, but even without academic graduates, because we have a massive churn of the workforce. So in terms of when you're looking at roles and stuff, think about your transferable skills. There's a lot of things that you would have done as a student that you can actually apply within a work environment. I mean, I made a list of the sort of key attributes that we work for within our sort of commercial profession. And when I was looking at them, I think they go across all boards. So stakeholder management, communication. I mean, as part of what you do, you'll be engaging with a wide range of people. It's how do you work with those individuals? How do you communicate with them? That's verbally as well as written. And then leadership. A lot of roles in the civil service do have leadership as a core attribute. And we are all expected to be role models, so it's how are you within your groups that you work with? If you've led a piece of project or an assignment, how have you pulled all that together? And then IT skills, the younger generation. I mean, when I went to school, I don't think there was even computers. That's probably showing my age. But IT skills is a massive requirement within the roles we do. You know, if you've used Excel, if you've used PowerPoint, if you've used Word, all of those is things that, you know, every one of our vacancy looks for. And then as you progress within my profession, we start looking at more technical expertise skills, which you'll get that in every profession. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, that definitely does answer the question for us. And Hannah, any advice you would give to people who feel maybe less confident applying for roles within the NHS?
I suppose that it's all right to not know what you want to do, but and you can come in and things change, don't it? And you start to learn, like you say, so about the NHS, there's so many areas that I didn't know about, and people, but seeing what's available and maybe what sparks an interest, and it's all right to try and speak to people. So I know it's hard nowadays to kind of go and visit areas and look around and start to get a feel, especially within, I think, the NHS, because there's quite a lot of worry. But, you know, I know with me as a ward manager, you know, I'd love people to give, you know, like to call up and find out what's, you know, if they've got an interest in it, let's think about what roles are available, how they might be able to apply, and that it's all right to not know 100% what you want to go in to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think sometimes you worry, especially as you graduate, that I need to be this and I'm going to have to do this and I've got to know, where actually you might go a completely different way or not know, and it's all right not to know, because sometimes you need the experience to help guide where you want to be.
Yeah, I think that's a common thing that we find working with students and graduates, is that sometimes people will be, I've done for example, I've done a history degree, so I must do something to do with history, when actually they can probably go and, you know, you can look into other fields, you can look into other experiences, and you can really broaden that. So no, that's excellent advice. And Lee, I don't know if you have anything to come in on that question, or if it's kind of more of the same.
Yeah, I mean, much more of the same. I think I'd be interested to know why you would be less confident. Actually, I'm sure any amount of reasons, but I don't think there's. I don't want to say that there isn't a reason to be less confident. The fact you've asked the question, that may well be, but I think if you understand a little bit of research around the success behaviours and the application process for the civil service, it's all quite generic. So I think a little bit of time around researching that and understanding what the civil service is after in any given behaviour or strength that it's asking about might enable you to build a little bit more confidence and understand that. But other than that, I can't think of one person that I've ever met across the range of departments who would stay in one job. We've said that there's any amount of different professionals in the civil service recognise professional rules as well as operational rules and the kind of generalist. So I think just be open to change, have something in mind, think about where you want to be in a year's time, 2 years' time, 5 years' time, but use the civil service, if that's where you're looking for, use them to get to where you want to be. It's not how it used to be when I joined, I think 29 years ago now. It really is a forward-looking, organisation. I'll talk about the civil service generally. Really proactive. It's not that kind of stuffy bowler hat walking across Westminster view that people used to think. You know, it's a real dynamic place to work. Principally, no huge difference to what it would be if you were applying to private sector, other than the fact that you're a public servant and you're there to serve the public, in effect. You know, you're not necessarily there to make money for a private sector, but as dynamic and certainly as rewarding, if not more rewarding.
Fantastic, thank you. That's really good, good advice and good kind of support for people. Now I know that Aisha and Lee, you've kind of already touched on this already, but we do have another question from Jay. So thank you, Jay. Everybody else, please do keep your questions coming. Which is, hi, I'm looking at a couple of civil service grad programs, and I'm wondering if there's anywhere you could recommend to get more information, as he's struggling just to find out from the basic overview. I don't know if you guys are able to answer that or kind of come in on that.
So the graduate schemes will always say what assessment criteria that they're going to be measuring it against and the process that they're going to be using. So within the civil service, we have the competency framework, which maps across behaviours by grade. And those grades are what you really need to focus on, because when the assessment panel is looking at your application, they'll be using that as a sort of a tick list. You know, what does your evidence state against what the behaviours are expected for that grade level? Success profile is also another process that we're using, and that tends to be that we'll, personal statements, CVs for the SIFT, and then there might be an assessment element, either through an online sort of process or through an interview as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. And that's really useful information for me to know, who obviously helps graduates. But just kind of asking you guys, it's not just the graduate program routes into the civil service and the NHS, is it? There are other ways of kind of progressing through and applying for entry level roles. Is that right?
Yeah. So I mean, if I can jump in there. As far as I'm aware, the graduate side of things for MOJ, I'm not actually sure it operates at the minute because of the change in how the apprenticeships are now being offered. So there's the civil service apprenticeships. There are opportunities for work experience. There are opportunities for young carers. Direct entry, of course, so the civil service careers website, so all roles which are available across all the government departments and the supporting agencies will be on there as long as they are appropriate for external candidates. Trying to think if there's anything else. There are opportunities as well around diversity internships, focused. I think we kind of touched on that already, around the BAME community, and also the fast stream. So fast stream can be taken from internally within government departments. I do believe there's still a process to become a fast stream candidate externally and to apply. So fast stream has worked across the civil service, typically in different departments across kind of short time scales. Maybe spend 6 months or 8 months, 9 months in one agency, one department, and then move on to the next, just to build up that kind of broad, diverse understanding of all the different departments, with the aim of, as the title would suggest, kind of fast stream up into senior leadership. It's normally kind of 3 to 5 years. I might be a little bit out now on that, but worth looking into that, particularly for postgraduates, I would suspect. But as far as MOJ goes, I'm not too sure we do much in the postgraduate world.
Yeah,
thank you.
Sorry, if I had a bit more on the fast stream, because that is one of our most successful civil service program. I think it's the second ranked in the Times top 100 graduate employers. So it is a world-class sort of program there. I think you need a 2-2 in terms of your degree outcome. And yeah, exactly like you said, postings across the different civil service departments. You have to have a bit of an idea of what profession you want to go into, whether it's finance, the accountancy side, legal, commercial, or a generalist, which will be the HR, people and capability sort of arenas.
Fantastic, thank you. And I know that there's a lot of people that they come and see me and they are interested in joining that civil service fast stream grad program. So it really is well worth one to keep an eye out for. So we're coming into the last 10 minutes. So I'll just start maybe one last question from me, and then see if there's any others that come through the comment section. Hannah, I'll start with you first. It's if you were to kind of give advice to a graduate right now, pretend one was there talking to you, what advice would you give to them about, their next steps after graduation?
I was going to say don't do it, but that's a joke. Stay at school. What are you doing? I think speak to people, and I know it's I think especially my job is very kind of focused, like on the floor, I suppose. I'm not saying the others out on the ground, but part of mine, was the professional, and you do your training and then you're in it a lot, and it's to keep going, I suppose, and don't stop. I know that sounds really simple, doesn't it? But I think speak to people, keep getting support, keep thinking, trying new things. It's all right to test out different things that you're interested in. Make network connections with people. So I suppose in terms of, like I say, the NHS and nursing, you make lots of, especially through your placements, you start to make links with people, and I think that really helps you in terms of your career. So use them and keep them, because some of my mentors were my people that supported me on placements at times, and they've helped guide my career, if you like, to, not get to where I am, but to support me to get to be, in leadership, and continue to support, to think about where my next steps are, and to start to, and again, I know, obviously we're all very different. It's okay not to know as well. It's okay to have a bit of an idea and think you might want to go, away, but it's all right to not be concrete and know 100%, because I think that can be a little bit overwhelming and disheartening sometimes, because if it doesn't go how you want it to go, you can feel a bit disappointed. But to just be a bit open-minded, really. But I know that's a load of ramble, sorry. No,
that's excellent advice and really good things for.
That's being a mental health nurse. We just ramble because we talk.
No, honestly, that was really, really good advice. Thank you. And Aisha, same question for you. If you were speaking to a graduate now about their next step, what would you say to them from a DWP standpoint?
So my daughter's a graduate. She graduated last year from English Lit and creative writing. And the first thing I said to her was, well done. The journey that you've been on as a student is challenging, full stop. To have finished your degree shows that you're resilient, you're determined. Having to adapted to, the different style of teaching that you might have had to undertake has made you a lot more independent, and also a self-starter. Those are all skills that you can take to an employer. So do not underestimate the life skills you've already created and built, and just keep on that journey. There is, whatever, just everything's a stepping stone into the next phase. So don't be fazed by what's going on with the economy. Everything's a challenge at the moment. You might get rejections. You might not hear from the employer. Just keep going. And that's all I would say. Believe in yourself, and just keep going.
Fantastic advice. Thank you so much. And finally, Lee, any advice that you would give to somebody who has just graduated or is about to graduate?
Yeah, I don't know if I can beat that, actually, because I think that's absolutely bang on. But I think, I didn't go to university, so all I wanted to do was join the police force. Ended up with a rugby injury. We got to before the medicals, so got what was basically a temporary job in the civil service, and here I am 29 years later. But I think during that time, I think consistently is there is a consistent is change in the civil service. So whatever you have in mind, then plan out for, as I said before, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Use the civil service. Think about the civil service and how you can use that to get to where you want to be. but don't be afraid of failing. Absolutely not. I think it's just understanding those incremental steps that you need to take to get to where you want to be. If it doesn't work the first time, the vast amount of opportunities in the civil service will get you to where you want to be, if you just spend a little bit of time thinking and planning about your journey.
Yeah, and I think if I throw in, so I don't know about other departments, but entry level within DWP starting salary at the HEO, so higher executive officer, is about 30,000 a year, which is a pretty good salary for, where we're looking at transferable general skills, nothing technical. Are you good at working within a team? Can you communicate well? Can you deliver at pace? Those are the sort of generic skills that we'd be looking at, and that's the sort of starting salary.
That is something that graduates look at, and I think that salary is a very, very lucrative one, and one that I think a lot of people would be really, really happy with. I know I would be. So yeah, I'd be really happy with something like that. So guys, that kind of brings us to the end of our panel discussion. I just want to say thank you so much for your support. I think the advice and I think the information you've provided is something that will be, or is very, very useful to current graduates, current final years, and even current students looking ahead into their next step of their studies. So I just want to say thank you so much again for joining us, and it's really good to have representation from your different departments and your different organisations. For everyone watching, thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget, our final InLeeds session is at 6 o'clock, and that's another panel discussion with SMEs in Leeds, which includes Shift Marketplace, Present Works, and Nimbus. So really, really good organisations to go and listen to. And this video will be on your University Careers Facebook or YouTube page, so you can go back and have a look, or just email your careers team for some support. But Lee, Aisha, Hannah, thank you very much again for joining us for today's session. Thank you so much.
Very welcome, and all the best, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
See you later.
Yes.
Bye.